Welcome to Social Aloe Ministries, where we are committed to glorifying God while exposing the devil. Ladies, I'm going to spend a few minutes speaking about how to catch a good man. However, before we jump off the springboard and into the dating pool, need to look at two things real quick. Because there are two things you need to do before you jump off into the pool. One, before you try to catch a good man, ensure that you are a good woman. Two, you don't catch a good man. The moment you try to catch a good man, you become a predator. And that's going to drive a good man away. You allow a good man to come to you. Now, the thing about being a good woman, it is not about you doing a self-assessment, because people usually think more highly of themselves than they ought. Ask people who will tell you the truth about yourself. For example, the friends that you have that you don't like speaking to because they tell you the truth, those are the ones that you need to pay attention to in this matter. Also, a great source of information: people you used to be in relationships with. Now, if you can't communicate with all or most of those individuals, that may not be a good sign. May not be a good sign. Sure, being best friends with an ex, not very common. But if you're, for example, if you're the reason why an ex or exes have filed a restraining order against you, if you're the reason why an ex has applied for a gun license or has bought a weapon, those are signs that you're not ready to catch a good man, because you can catch the best man in the world and you have some broken edges, some sharp edges that's going to cause injuries. And as the saying goes, hurt people hurt people. So this is about being honest. Before you jump off in the pool looking for someone, you also have to look at what you bring to the relationship. I want to mention about predatory. Yes, there are times when it is great when a woman can take initiative. But there's a difference between taking initiative and taking charge. If you like to be in charge in a relationship, a good man, and especially a godly man, is not going to stand for that. There's a certain order in relationships. And if you become too controlling, there's a lady in the Bible named Jezebel, and she was very controlling. She was very manipulative. She was a predator. Those are traits you do not want to display. So again, there's a difference between taking initiative and taking charge. And some of you may have been down a road where maybe a man was too kind to you. He didn't resist you when you wanted to do certain things. So basically you just had things your way, and you end up losing respect for him. Another thing is, in trying to quote unquote catch a good man, which I say you shouldn't, you do not do things to get his attention. You allow the Lord to point you out to him. So if you're looking for a bad boy, which you may have a history of attracting, like with your clothing, if you keep it low cut, short, and tight, if you're looking for a good man, then you had to switch it up to covering up and keep your goodies out of sight. So again, for a bad boy, low cut, short and tight. For a good man, keep your goodies out of sight. There's a story in the Bible regarding Ruth and Boaz. In order for Boaz, or for Ruth to catch Boaz, so to speak, it's not what she did, it's who she was. Before we look at that, I'm going to touch on Jezebel real quick. In 2 Kings 9, verse 22, it states, "And it came to pass, when Joram saw Jehu, that he said, 'Is it peace, Jehu?' And he answered, 'What peace, so as long as the whoredoms of thy mother Jezebel and her witchcrafts are so many.'" Now here's an example of witchcraft that a lot of people don't consider. In verse 30, "And when Jehu was come to Jezreel, Jezebel heard of it. So because she heard of it, she painted her face and tied her head and looked out a window." If you're afraid to let a man see your true colors, not a good sign. With Jezebel painting her face, and I'm not saying this as being against makeup, it's a matter of how it's being used. If you're always putting your best foot forward, but unwilling to show your true colors, not ready for a good man. Because you want a good man to love you for who you are. Despite your past, you want a good man to love you for who you are. We all have a past. Some people's pasts are, in a sense, cleaner than others. In the story of Hosea and Gomer, Gomer was a promiscuous woman, but the Lord sent Hosea to redeem her. And it was similar to how Christ is our Redeemer. And that was an example of that relationship. And the same redemptive qualities applies to the story of Ruth and Boaz. Ruth was from Moab. She married one of Naomi's sons. And when they moved back to Israel, after all the men in that family had died, Ruth, she was down and out. Ruth probably was not wearing makeup when she met Boaz. She was out in the field working. She probably had dust all over her face, probably husk from wheat and barley. And she probably wasn't even thinking about catching a man. But here's what happened in Ruth 2, starting in verse 8. "Then said Boaz unto Ruth," and this is after he asked about, "Who's that woman?" Because the Lord pointed out. So of all the women who were gleaning in the field, she stood out. In this world, there's more grass than sunflowers. But she was in that field, and the Lord made her stand out like a sunflower. So when Boaz approached her, he said, "Hearest thou not, my daughter? Go not to glean in another field, neither go from hence, but abide here fast by my maidens, which meant there were other women around, but she stood out. But it wasn't because of her appearance. "Let her eyes be on the field, that they do reap, and go thou after them. Have I not charged the young men that they shall not touch thee?" He charged young men not to touch her. So Ruth was showing that she's willing to get down and dirty. So in a sense, Boaz saw her when she was at her worst, but yet she stood out. Yet in a sense, he was separating her, and not necessarily for himself at the time, but he had respect for her because of who she was. And when thou art athirst, go unto the vessels and drink that which the young men have drawn. So he was providing for her. That's another thing. If you're trying to catch a man and your eyes are fixed on his wallet, but because Naomi was asking for, or Ruth wasn't asking for anything, it's like Boaz was willing to give her the world. Then she fell on her face and bowed herself to the ground and said unto him, Why have I found grace in thine eyes, that thou shouldest take knowledge of me, seeing I am a stranger? And Boaz answered and said unto her, It hath fully been shown unto me all that thou hast done unto thy mother-in-law since the death of thine husband, and how thou hast left thy father and thy mother and the land of thy nativity, and art come unto a people which thou knowest not. The Lord recompense thy work, and a full reward be given thee of the Lord of Israel, under whose wings thou art come to trust. So Ruth was a woman from the other side of the tracks, so to speak. She had a history. But one thing both of them had in common was a love for the Lord. Ruth did not do anything to catch Boaz. She was a virtuous woman, and that within itself was enough to capture his attention. That was enough for Boaz to start giving her special treatment. When I mentioned about predatory practices, if you're chasing after a man and he's not biting, so to speak, but you keep on pursuing, those actions are reminiscent of Jezebel, someone who is selfish. With Ruth, she demonstrated that she was selfless. She gave up all those things to support Naomi. So it wasn't a matter about her being a widow, her being from Moab. Even though she was looking her worst, Boaz saw the best in her. There are certain things that will not matter when the Lord brings you and someone together. Even when you're at your worst, that person is going to see the best in you. You don't have to bait the hook, so to speak, to try to catch a good man. Have a relationship with the Lord. Be a good woman. And the Lord will bring you and a Boaz together, if that is his plan for you. Because there are a lot of women out there who have done things to catch a man and then realize that those things that they did, they can no longer sustain to keep the man, and the relationship falls apart. So it becomes like sport fishing. Catch and release. Catch and release. So, if you want to catch a good man, first be a good woman. Then, don't try to catch that man. Let him come to you. let the Lord point you out to him as if you were a sunflower standing amongst the grass. There were other women in Boaz's field, but Naomi was the one who captured his attention. If you want to keep it low cut, short and tight, bad boys are going to keep on swarming in. Keep your goodies out of sight and see what happens. God bless you.